Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We have got another great webinar Wednesday for you today. So we're just letting everyone in now. As you probably know by now, my name is Stephanie Fox, and I will be moderating this webinar. So we have the rest of the team on the call. We have Julian Boulding, Paul Squirrel, and Lizzie Gold, and they're all available if you need any help with anything. So just some housekeeping before I introduce our speaker. Timings wise, I'll now give a 5-minute introduction. Speaker Jody will talk for about 35 minutes. We'll then have a 15-minute Q&A at the end, and we're aiming to finish at 1:55 London time, so you can be ready for your next virtual appointment. You'll notice I've muted everyone's microphones. Please keep these muted at all times. We will unmute your microphone if we're calling on you to ask a question. But that being said, we'd appreciate it if you could keep your videos on so our speaker has some friendly faces to present to, if you don't mind doing that. As I mentioned, we're going to have a Q&A portion at the end. If you have any questions in the meantime, you can send them directly to me in the chat. So to do this, just go to your chat box where it says to. You should see a drop-down menu. Instead of everyone, just select Stephanie Fox. I'm going to go through all of the questions and I'll select a few to ask Jody once she's finished speaking. So all of the questions should be sent to me in the chat box. If you would like to ask Jody the question yourself, just type "I'll ask" in the chat box. If you prefer for me to ask, that's fine, but please do say so. You should hopefully now have your Zoom viewing mode set to speaker view. If not, just click speaker view at the top right of your screen. Our speaker will be sharing slides on her screen, so if you can't see her speaker window when her slides are on the screen, select show active speaker video. If you have any technical issues, you can message my colleague Lizzie Gold either in the chat or you can email her at lizzzi.gold@thenetwork1.com. As usual, we'll be recording this webinar and we'll distribute the recording afterwards. So if you prefer not to take notes, that's totally fine. And if for any reason the whole system crashes, just wait a couple of minutes and log in with the same link that you used to log in this afternoon. Thank you very much. Now I'm delighted to introduce our speaker, Jody. Jody Sutter is the owner of the Sutter Company, a new business consultancy that advises small agencies on organizing and operationalizing their growth strategy. She started the Sutter Company after more than 2 decades of running business development teams for agencies, large and small, and spanning a diverse list of disciplines. They've included RGA, Havas Media, as well as small independent shops like the Via Agency and design firm the Carbon Smolin Agency. She frequently speaks at leading industry events around the world, such as Inbound, the ICA's Agency Transformation Summit in Toronto, the Drum's Pitch Perfect New Business Conference in London, and is a featured instructor in the 4A's Learning and Development Programme. Jody believes that the key to effective new business strategy is playing to your strengths. In this webinar, she will explain how to land on a new business strategy based on things you're already good at. Without further ado, I'm pleased to turn over to Jody Sutter.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here, and it's great to see so many people on this webinar. So thank you, Julian and team at Network One for gathering everyone. As Stephanie was saying, yeah, I want to talk to you a little bit about a new business program that is really based on playing to your strengths. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Get rid of my settings. So my presentation is excited once it gets going. So it's, yeah, okay. Playing to your strengths. Now, one of the things that keeps me in business, and Stephanie, thank you for the introduction. Wonderful job at sort of, I think, giving context to my background and where I am today. So today I primarily work with smaller agencies between 5 and 55 people, and I often work directly with the CEO or the co-founders, the top leaders. So what I find is that agencies of a certain size, a smaller size, typically it's difficult to to have a dedicated resource to new business. And I find often it's the CEO who's the best business development resource that agency has. It's not the only business development resource, but it's crucial that the strategy and the tone come from them. And so what's even more important is that they learn how to play to their strengths. So one of the things that keeps me in business is that I find a persistent struggle among agency leaders in in developing, and maybe more importantly, sustaining a business development program. And I always pose the question to them, well, what's holding you back? And sometimes they give me answers I expect. But what I really have seen is that I think what holds a lot of people back, quite frankly, is a little bit of fear. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But it's interesting because we call it business development. We say it's the lifeblood of our firm, and yet we often find everything that we, we can to avoid it. Now, I believe sort of the bedrock of my business that any creative professional, any agency owner can feel confident about her or his ability to generate revenue for their business. And I hold this belief pretty firmly so that when I run into persistent problems like the inability to develop or sustain a business development program over time, I I get stubborn about thinking about why that problem exists and thinking about the right solutions. So a few years back, I started to ponder this question, exactly why business development can be so difficult to sustain. And because I love analogies, I I compared it to an event that happened in my own life not too long ago. So my partner, he's got a small four-seater plane. It looks just like this. Actually, the paint job on this one is probably a little bit better. It's a Piper Cherokee Warrior, and it's fun to have in the family. We use it to, we're located on the eastern end of Long Island in New York State in the US. So we take the plane to the Hudson Valley on a autumn weekend, or to Block Island for dinner in the summertime. It's a nice little thing to have around. So my partner, Rudy, he thought it would be a great idea if I learned how to fly as well. And there are actually a lot of really good practical reasons for that, but mostly because he thought I'd enjoy it. And I thought I might too. So I took my first flying lesson. And the result of it was I hated it. I was terrified. I was surprisingly terrified sitting in that pilot seat. And just to be clear, I'm not afraid of flying. I actually love being a passenger. But like I said, I was really surprised at how out of control I felt, how scary it really was. And I felt like I never wanted to do it again. The other thing that I thought was interesting when I thought back on that experience is I also thought about the details you have to keep straight. There are long checklists. I don't know if there are any pilots on the phone here on the call here today, but there's a long checklist that you have to go through before you get into your plane. And there's a long checklist that you have to go through once you land and before you get out of the plane. And it's important, crucial, life-saving stuff. And yet it's also stultifyingly boring. So what I realized is I was feeling this kind of potent concoction of fear and boredom, dangerous combination. And so when I was thinking about this persistent problem, I thought, fear and boredom. I bet that's how a lot of my clients feel when they are approached with with business development. This combination of fear and this combination and boredom. So let me talk a little bit about the fear first, as I promised I would. And I don't know, I don't want to overblow it. Maybe fear is too strong a word, but it is what I see, as it is what I witness with my clients. So the first thing I think most obviously is this fear of rejection, because no matter how good you are at business development, no matter how you or someone like me can help you mitigate the amount of no's that you're going to get, you're still going to get more no's than yeses. So it's a vulnerable feeling. And when we feel vulnerable, we don't really like it. It's uncomfortable. We don't like when people don't like us. So it's when we're put in a it's easy to avoid putting yourself in a vulnerable position. Some of the other fears maybe are a little more subtle, but I think that they're real nonetheless. The second fear that I see is this uncertainty around your offering, and maybe more specifically, the uncertainty around being able to communicate the value behind your offering. This goes back to your strategic positioning, and there are a lot of people out there, really smart people, who can help you with strategic positioning. And I know a lot of strategic thinking goes into what your positioning is going to be. And yet, I think that's also an issue that agencies are consistently struggling with. So when you're uncertain about how to communicate what your positioning is, if you're uncertain about how to communicate your value, it also puts you in a vulnerable position. And often results in you avoiding having to do the work. Another fear is where to start and how to keep going. So there are a lot of things that you could be doing. How do you know which is the right one for you? And perhaps also there are some people on the webinar here today that have started business development programs in the past. So good for you. But you've also found that after a period of months, maybe weeks, hopefully not weeks, that it petered out and you weren't able to sustain it. So maybe there's some fear around, well, if I try this again, is it just going to peter out in a couple of months? And then the final fear is really this unknown around, well, what's really going to pay off? If you put in the time and the money and the resources to sustain this business development program, and after a year, you're not much farther from where you were at the beginning, what a terrible feeling. Better to just avoid the whole thing. And then there's the boredom. We tend not to seek out activities when we don't understand the mechanics of them, when we can't relate them to our own talents, and if we're uncertain whether it's going to yield a satisfying result. And maybe this third point here is less about boredom and more about an excuse. I think when we feel this, we can often we can determine that we've got bigger priorities like staffing issues or client problems or client challenges. Or maybe you just need a new phone system or a new health insurance plan. That at times may seem more preferable than actually going out and generating some revenue for your company. So these two things, fear and boredom, and I think the combination of the two can convince us to stay in our safe place and to keep doing the things that we've always been doing, no matter how unproductive or how unsatisfying. It's the devil you know, right? But I think we only get results through our actions, and I want to make it easier for you to take action. I want to introduce to you an approach and a strategy for generating revenue that's based on doing stuff that you're already good at. Because I think when you play to your strengths, you're going to be more likely to follow through. You're going to be more likely to do what you need to do to get your agency, to grow your agency in the way you want to, and maybe you're even going to enjoy yourself along the way as well. So I'd spent many years trying to persuade my clients to embrace what I would call a well-rounded business development plan. So I tried to get them to embrace the things that I would do as a trained and experienced business development person. And again, I was always surprised when sometimes they wouldn't follow through. The interesting thing was, what I would find is that everyone get really excited and pumped about the plan, about the strategy. And then again, after a matter of months, things would start to dwindle away. And I'd call my clients up and after 3 or 4 months, 6 months, and say, how are things going? Well, we haven't implemented because we found other things to get in the way. So my ideas were often greeted with enthusiasm, and yet I would find that they wouldn't be implemented. And no amount of persuasion was really doing the trick. So briefly, before we talk about strengths, I mentioned this idea of a well-rounded business development system. What is that exactly? So I actually call it a new business ecosystem, because like an ecosystem in the natural world, the new business ecosystem, if it's going to be healthy and vital, should include should include the components that are right for the environment. And what's right for the environment? Those are the things that play well to your strengths, of course, which we'll be talking about, but also that align well to your goals, and that can be completed with the talent and resources that you have at hand. So, like a natural ecosystem, the components that you put into it, you have to put the right components into the ecosystem if they're going to thrive and be successful. And like a natural ecosystem, if you're placing the right things in there, they'll also help each other grow and thrive. All the components are going to work together in a harmonious way. So your new business ecosystem is based on 4 components. The foundation is your intellectual property. So this is the basis of all your original owned content. And it ranges from your strategic positioning to your case studies, to your work process, to any proprietary research that you might do. Now, typically you may not use your intellectual property in its original form for your activities, but it's really important to maintain it diligently. So for instance, you may have your case studies, your case histories are part of your intellectual property, but a case study will look different on your website than it will in a proposal, or than it will in, say, an awards submission. But they all come from that same root of intellectual property. Now, these are the types of things that don't need daily nurturing or daily monitoring or updating, but they do need care and feeding. And in most cases, I would say that the components in your intellectual property, or under your intellectual property umbrella, need maintaining and attention at least once a year. I'll give you another example of intellectual property that I see neglected all the time, and that would be team bios. So this is something I see a lot, where an agency is getting ready to submit a really big proposal, and the last thing that goes in there, or maybe one of the last things that go in there, are the team bios. And so you go back to your archives and maybe you polish them off, and you realize that they're all a little outdated, or they're simply a litany of clients you've worked with and employers that where you've been before your current agency. Not very interesting, but they'll do. And I think it's so ironic, because a lot of agencies tend to say that one of their major differentiators is their people. So I see a little bit of irony there, a little bit of a disconnect. Our people are important, and yet our team buyers are one of the most neglected components in our intellectual property in the new business ecosystem. Anyway, as I said, so this intellectual property, really important stuff, important to maintain. It's a really core piece of your agency's value, and it forms the foundation of the 3 other components that make up the ecosystem. One of them is your marketing tools. So your marketing tools, as you might imagine, are all the things that you use to generate awareness, to support your agency's brand, and it would include your website, your SEO strategy, your business cards, your thought leadership strategy. And then there are the sales tools. And so the sales tools are more directly related to the support of sales. So that would include things like your CRM database, your contact database. It would include things like your basic email scripts that you use, your pitch scripts when you are writing a cold email or warm email. I don't think there's no such thing as cold email, but when you're writing your warm email or making that call. It would also include things like your strategy for networking. What associations should you join? What events should you attend? And how does that relate back to your goal? It includes things like your referral strategy. And then there are the closing tools, and I define closing anything from that point when your prospective client says that they have a project that's right for you as the agency, and they want you to, and they're interested in talking to you about it. There's a budget, there's a real scope, and there's a real budget behind it. So once they say that, you move into your closing period. And closing tools would include things like proposal templates, pricing templates, and pricing approach. I actually tend to also even put the credentials deck in closing tools. I think we misuse the credentials deck, and this is probably more of a topic for another webinar. I think we tend to misuse the credentials deck, though, as a marketing tool, when it's really a tool for justification. It's a post-rationalization tool. As you've probably seen, it's not a terribly compelling marketing tool. It's one of those things that you're probably also redoing and redoing, and the clients never seem to really engage with. They ask for it because they're not sure what else to ask for. But it's an imperfect marketing tool, and I think it's much better used when the client has already decided that you're probably the agency that they want to work with, and now they need to sell that into to their management, to their boss. And so that basic credentials deck helps to justify the decision, all the basic facts and figures. Here are our clients. Here are the services. Here are the awards we've won. But anyway, I'm going to move on from that. So here's your new business ecosystem. It can the 4 components, and when you choose right, you have an ecosystem that is happy and thrives. The other thing I want to make a point about saying is that when you first develop your ecosystem, I'll often recommend with my clients, choose only a few things. It doesn't have to be comprehensive at the start. It's more important that you start with a few things that you know you can do and build from there. So you need to choose the components that are right. And how do you do that? Well, I alluded to it a little bit, but your new business ecosystem is going to be strong when you choose components that, first of all, align well with your positioning, that support your narrative. So we are weaving a narrative through everything that we do, through every sort of outer form of communication. And sometimes we forget that, because again, going back to that bio example, we do things that create fissures in that narrative, that create points of confusion for the audience. And the thing is that if you're not controlling your narrative, your audience is going to control it for you. They're going to draw their own conclusions when they see those disconnects. So it's really important for you to be able to control that narrative. And finally, the choices that you make for your new business ecosystem are based on playing to your strengths. And of course, that's what I want to spend a little bit more time on today. So one more note before I move to that. When I realized that, at a certain point, I realized that no amount of cajoling and persuasion was going to get an agency leader to do the things that he or she felt that they weren't right, that didn't feel right to them, that they didn't want to do, that they didn't enjoy doing. So that was another sort of sticky and persistent problem. And I started thinking, well, how can I get around that? So I started thinking about all the different agency owners that I've worked with throughout my career, and they all tended to fall into several personality types. And I narrowed them down to 4, and that's what I want to introduce you to those today. So the first personality type is the hunter. And the hunter has an instinct for selling, as you may not be surprised by it to hear from the name. The hunters are energized by connecting with others. They're at ease when talking to strangers. So one of the ways I describe a hunter, it's that person who gets on a transatlantic flight in JFK and walks off the plane in Heathrow with a deal in hand, simply by having a conversation with a person that they were randomly seated next to in business class. That's never happened to me. I'm actually not a natural born hunter, despite my background in business development, but I know people who are. And sometimes it's an innate talent. Sometimes it's a skill that they've developed. I often find that hunters are not they are not overly common in the agency world, but when they are, they tend to be also the owners or founders of the firm. And a lot of times it's because those individuals, they had to learn how to be hunters. They had to learn how to be hunters for the survival of their business. But not only that, they're also the ones who are the most passionate about the agency. They're the biggest boosters for the agency. It feels comfortable for them because it's their baby. The other thing about hunters is they tend to be fanatics for customer satisfaction. They can err on the side of the customer is always right. And I've worked with a few of these folks as well. It can drive their teams crazy because they tend not to, the downside, the disadvantage is that they tend not to push back on the client at times when maybe they should be. Those are the hunters. Next one are the communicators. These guys are the big picture people. These guys are the ones who are really good at taking complex information and turning it into something that is easy to understand. They captivate a crowd. They tend to be your keynote speakers and your TED talkers. They're the ones who are perennially on the pitch team, and maybe you're one of those, or maybe you know one of those people who every time a big presentation rolled around, they were always being asked to lead it or play a major role in it. because it was such an easy solution. They were so good in that presentation room. I know I used to rely on those a lot when I was running business development teams, because I knew I wouldn't have to do as much work preparing them to make an impression as I would with someone who is not as much of a natural born communicator. But they also have a downside. They don't necessarily have the patience for nurturing relationships. They're not always that great with the details. So a lot of those communicators, especially the ones who have a higher profile, they can sometimes get a little borderline arrogant. And I think that arrogance can sometimes prevent them from engaging one-on-one in a really empathetic and authentic way, in the same way, say, a hunter can. The next profile is the promoter. I hope that everyone knows who, who this is. And for those who maybe don't, it's Gary Vaynerchuk, and he's the founder of VaynerMedia. And I put him here. He's the only real person I use to illustrate a profile, because he's so perfect. He's my poster child for the promoter. So promoters, they've got big personalities and they've got big personal brands. They're lifelong students of the power of a personal brand to promote. They've got something to say and they're not afraid to say it. And they really enjoy being the center of attention. Another thing that I think is interesting about promoters is their willingness to allow their personal life to bleed into their business life and vice versa. So these are the people that are more likely to feel comfortable about sharing family photos on their Instagram, their business Instagram feed, than some others. So I use Gary Vaynerchuk. If you don't know him, or if you've never actually seen like a keynote address, he's easy to find because he's all over the internet, because he's such a good promoter. So he practices what he preaches, right? He's got millions of Twitter followers. He's making and posting videos every 10 minutes. And again, going back to the keynotes, I don't know if you've ever seen a keynote, but he's not a particularly good speaker. He's a force of nature. He's sort of unbridled energy. He offers a tremendous amount of information. He's very generous with his knowledge, but I would not call him a suave presenter like a communicator would be. He's more, like I said, this promoters tend to be more sort of this raw energy that's unstoppable. And then the last profile, finally, we have are the thinkers. So the thinkers are the introverts of the bunch. Just because they're introverted doesn't mean that they can't be excellent business developers. Like the communicators, they share the ability of making complex information easy for mere humans to understand. Unlike the communicators, they tend to have the patience for the details that is very useful for business development, especially developing strong one-on-one relationships. They can often be strong presenters. They can often also be strong prospectors. The key with thinkers is they need to have a sense of purpose. They need to understand why they're in the room. They need to understand why they're sending that email, as opposed to some of the other profiles who are just simply comfortable being in the environment where they're most comfortable. You know, I used to work with a thinker when I was running business development for Havas Media many years ago. He was our head of research and strategy, and he was actually both a really powerful prospector as well as a powerful presenter, but you wouldn't have necessarily known it by looking at him. But I remember once putting him in a presentation. It was a really important presentation, and he, unlike the creatives or the strategists, he was the one who delivered the aha moment. And it was even more powerful precisely because he didn't necessarily look the role. He was kind of sort of a mild-mannered math teacher type of guy. But because we were able to create an environment where he felt comfortable, he did a wonderful job at presenting, really connected with the client, and I think was primarily a big part of why we won the business. So hunters, promoters, communicators, and thinkers, I'm hoping that you've recognized yourself in one of them, or maybe as often happens, you see one as a primary personality for you, and maybe you've recognized one as a secondary personality. So now you know this. What do you do with this information? Well, if you're a hunter or if you work with a hunter, my primary advice to you would be to let them work their network, allow them to put them in a position to nurture relationships and to close deals. If you're an agency run by a communicator, then don't do what you do for a hunter. In fact, avoid that and get them out there on the speaking circuit. I know the speaking circuit these days looks really different than the speaking circuit did 2 years ago, but it'll be back. Get them out there speaking, get them to tap into their natural ability to be a thought leadership, and maybe support them with a bit of publicity and PR. And then let the leads come in from that. Let them attract the right clients. If you're a promoter, I would say the most important thing for you is to harness your energy for good and build a brand around, and for promoters really need a brand built around them. This can sometimes be a hard thing to hear, especially in situations if you are an agency owner who recognizes themselves as a promoter. But let's say you also have a 5-year horizon for getting out of the business, for selling the agency, for retiring. So it can be hard for that promoter to hear that the brand is so important, or that their personality is so important to the brand. And I think that there is a way to transition, but if you are in that sort of special spot where you're thinking like, well, I see my near-term horizon, I would say just make sure that you do put in a really strong transition plan. Don't deny the gift that you've given your agency to keep it strong, at least for the short term. But so if you're a promoter, build a brand around them, give them outlets to express themselves, and then of course make sure you follow through on the leads that come in as a result of their activity, as a result of their energy being communicated, being put out into the world. And if you're a thinker, then focus on the stuff that you're good at. So introverts, thinkers, introverts, most introverts, they gain energy from more internally facing activities. So it may be that you want to put your thinker on writing a book, writing white papers, or if you're a creative, I find some form of creative expression. Maybe if you're a creative director that runs an agency, maybe you're also a painter or a sculptor or a musician. If you feel comfortable, if you can add a little promoter in there and you feel comfortable allowing that creative expression to be the other side of your creative life to be known and promoted, maybe think about doing that. So get them to do what they're good at, and then make sure you're merchandising that content. So another thing you might do, if it's a proprietary research study that you do annually or quarterly, allow the thinker to run that, and then support that thinker with a team that's going to help you merchandise the content. And as I said, thinkers tend to be the ones who really need to understand the purpose behind what they're doing. This is where a strong positioning is super important. So if you have a strong positioning, it's going to allow you to pre-qualify the leads or pre-qualify the opportunities and pre-qualify your prospects. And that'll make a thinker feel much more comfortable, much more willing to do the business development work. So this answers the question maybe about how to the right business development strategy for the agency leader, but I thought I'd just finish up by talking about who's on your team and how to understand the strengths on your team, or how to maybe support that the CEO or the leadership. What I thought I would do is just give you what my theoretical 3-year plan for an agency that's led by a communicator. And I chose the communicator. I think if I had more time, maybe we could do 3-year plans for all 4 profiles. But I chose the communicator for 2 reasons. One, because communicators are actually pretty easy to build a business development program around, because they are willing to go out there and be a personality. But I also chose them because they don't necessarily align well with the typical sales activities that you think that most agencies should undertake. So The communicators, they're big idea people, they're keynote speakers, thought leaders. In year one, if you as a communicator were thinking, well, what do I do next year? We're in a really good time now where it's makes sense to start planning for 2021. The first thing I would say is just make sure you're supported by a marketing coordinator. If you can only if you're in a position to if you can be only supported in sort of the lightest way possible. So you want a person who's going to help you with some of the details that you are not necessarily so great at managing. This is the person who's going to maintain contact lists for you. They're also going to maintain the list of events and conferences where you should be a presence. They're going to help you with the scheduling. They may even help you expand your presence on social media, doing all the little detail logistical stuff that can drive a communicator crazy. And they're going to follow up on the leads, even more important. That's where a communicator-led strategy can really fall down. You can do a big keynote speech a week, but if you're not following up on the leads that are coming through because of that, then it's a failed program. So that's year one. So year two, maybe you've done such a fantastic job and your agency is growing and there's more resources to invest back into business development. You want to add a couple of other layers of support. So maybe the next layer you add is a director level new business or marketing person. And now you have someone who can also manage that IP arsenal, that arsenal of intellectual property. They can take on some of the pitch team management or all of the pitch team management. And you can also give them the job of following up on the leads, which of course is an incredibly important role. And you're going to benefit by having someone a little bit more senior doing that. You can also complement yourself with by bringing in a strategist and getting them more involved in business development, helping you flesh out big ideas and maybe taking on some of the writing that is time consuming and maybe is more detail oriented. And you've still got that coordinator level person who's maintaining the lists, handling the scheduling, and taking care of the social media machine. Maybe even by year two, you want to think about an outside resource. And I think a lot of agencies, at least agencies here in the US, are only now starting to take advantage of the gig economy. They're only now starting to take advantage of the incredible wealth of talent who are independent contractors or freelancers or separate business owners. So a communicator is probably going to be really well served with a publicist who can increase the exposure the communicator has. So year three, you're doing phenomenally well. You can start to invest even more. You can support your new business and marketing machine, maybe with dedicated production. Maybe you think about hiring a new business manager, and perhaps that new business manager is more like a hunter, and that complements the communicator. You've still got that coordinator level person. Hopefully the original person you had in the marketing coordinator role has now been promoted after 3 years. But they're still there maintaining those logistical things, coordinating the stuff they're good at coordinating. And then your strategist is also building out her team. You've got a bigger social media strategy team, a bigger social media engine, and maybe you've even got a writer to help pump out that thought leadership. That publicist is still there, still increasing the exposure for the communicator. But maybe now you've also, as the communicator, you've offloaded some of the responsibility, the management responsibility, you've delegated that to your new business or marketing director. And like I said, this doesn't necessarily have to all be within your agency. You may be looking at this and thinking, my God, this is the org chart for my entire agency. There's always that option for outsourcing to third parties. So maybe you want to outsource to a third party for production, for graphics, for video, as well as social media. There's a lot of fantastic people out there who are social media strategists. So if you're a communicator and this feels right to you, I've just given you your 3-year plan. Sorry for the other 3 profiles, but I think you've also been given, I hope, a template that allows you to see how this can be sort of fleshed out over time, and how you can start with just you and your strengths, picking a few things that you're good at, and then building it out from there, building out that strong new business ecosystem where all the components work well together and the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So I started out talking about what holds us back, that fear of rejection. There are more no's than yeses, that uncertainty around how to communicate the real value of what you do, the sense of where do I start and how do I keep it going? I don't want to fail again. And this idea of what's really going to pay off. I tried that before, it didn't work. Where do I go now? By playing to your strengths, I hope that you see now that you'll be more likely to win confidently. You're also going to make more discerning decisions around where to invest your time, because of course time is probably, I say time is the enemy of new business. It's one of the most precious things we have as executives. And you're going to be more likely to cultivate growth in a strategic, supported way. I did just recently launch my new business strengths quiz, my new business strengths profile. And you can take that quiz at www.thesuttercompany.com/new-biz-strengths. It's not actually on my website. This is a separate landing page, so please include the slug. You can also, if you'd like, I'm happy to offer anyone on this call today a complimentary new business consultation, which you can do from my website. You can book a time that works for you, or you can simply do it the old-fashioned way. Feel free to send me an email, excuse me, or call me on my mobile. And thank you so much for your time. I'm looking forward to maybe taking some questions if there are any. Should I go ahead and stop sharing?
Yes, please. We have had quite a few questions in, actually.
Okay.
So Lionel Kurt has a question that he would like to ask you. Lionel, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Hello, everyone. Just asking in the slide. I don't remember the number of the slide, but you talked about a publicist that could assist. I think the profile which was the communicators. What do you mean as a publicist? Is that a PR assistant or?
Yes.
Okay.
It could be a PR assistant, or I think in most cases, I would see that it would be a really good investment to hire a third party. So to hire a professional publicist who maybe has their own PR firm. And there are a bunch of, at least here in the US, there are a number of smaller PR firms that specialize in working with agencies and agency leaders. And they, it's a good investment, I think, because they will shortcut the process that one has to go through as a communicator to figure out, all right, I know I'm a communicator. I know what I want to say. I know what my audience, where I know who my audience is. And then you have to figure out, well, where are those people? And what are the right events? How do I build relationships with the event managers? How do I, build enough trust so that they want me to speak there? And that's where a publicist can be very helpful, because if you're talking to the right one, they are already going to have those relationships. I mean, it's similar in the role they play in PR, where they have relationships with the journalists that you also want to reach. So in certain situations, it can be a great investment.
Good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks very much. So another question from the audience. Someone has said, the 4 personalities, should you have one of each on the team? Or should you pick one, maybe the CEO, and build your strategy around their strengths?
All things being equal, I would say the latter. But I'm going to qualify that a little bit. That is especially important for smaller agencies that don't have the resources to hire that business development person. But I think it also can apply for, I'm thinking about the largest agencies that I know of. I think it really helps to have that leadership involved. So should you have all represented? I think it's more important to hire people that are right for your agency. Like, I don't think it's a necessary box that you have to check. I think what's more crucial is that you look at your team, the team that you love working with, that does a great job for you, and you say, all right, who do we have? And what you might find is like, oh my gosh, we've got a little bit of every personality, and that's great because you'll all complement each other. But you may also find that I don't know, maybe you're an agency of hunters. I don't think it's going to be enough to fire them all and hire other people. I think you want to figure out, okay, we're all hunters. So what are we going to do? And what do we need then to be supported to make up for to both support our strengths and maybe bolster our weaknesses a little bit?
Perfect. Thanks so much. So another question we've had is how important is it to have members of the day-to-day agency team at the pitch with the pitch team?
So I'm going to maybe ask for a little more context. So in other words, I think this is going back to the age-old debate of, do we have our best presenters at the meeting versus the people who are going to be on the business, assuming those are two different sets of people. And I usually say both. I think that there's a middle ground that a lot of agencies don't take advantage of. So they focus on like, what's going to win us the business. And so I say, yeah, get your best presenters in the room. On the other hand, in most cases, the pitch process is not just that meeting. And I don't think agencies think strategically about introducing other team members at other points in the process. I also don't think that agencies do a great job of grooming other team members, and this is a long-term strategy of grooming other team members, so there isn't that issue of, well, we really want, Paul to lead this account, but he's a terrible presenter, so let's get Stephanie in there instead, right? So you want to avoid doing that by thinking long-term and thinking how these people that are really important to us that do great work, how are we going to improve the presentation skills so it's a no-brainer? Of course you put them in the room.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Another question we've had is, should founders of very small agencies, i.e. 3 to 5 people, who are also involved in servicing clients, outsource business development?
Sometimes. So I would say, and also by outsourcing business development, I think that can mean a lot of different things. So that, I guess maybe my other question would be, what exactly are you outsourcing? If Mega's still there, are you outsourcing that lead generation? Are you outsourcing the business development director who's going to manage pitches? Can you be a little bit more specific about what you want to outsource?
Hi, basically lead generation. I think that's one area.
Yeah.
Because for smaller agencies, referrals are easy, right?
Yeah.
And even closing the deals is easier. But getting
for
the
all
leads,
agencies, I'm glad that's good for you though.
so we've been lucky, I guess. But referrals have been easy for us, and closing the deals have been easy for us.
Yeah.
But because we're 3 to 5 people, and sometimes we're involved in, like you're saying, dealing with CEOs or managing clients, we don't have the time to sort of go out there and get the leads, or schedule a list or do networking and a lot of those kind of things. So
Yeah.
should we bring a hunter on board? Let's say I'm a thinker, so should I bring a hunter on board because it's gig economy to sort of get them out there and do a bit of a lead searching kind of job?
It's definitely, answer is a big yes, but. So yes, but you have to be prepared to manage them well. So an agency, what I see, here's the mistake I see agencies make. I see agencies think it's going to be a quick, easy, maybe not cheap, but a quick and easy way to just get it out of their way, to solve that problem, to make it go away. Someone else is going to bring in the leads. It's only you. So first of all, so you got to stay involved. You can't just be offloading this task just because you don't like doing it. A lead generator is only going to be as successful as the story that you give them. So you want to be certain that your positioning is strong and that you're telling that story well, that you've got the tools and the ammunition that they need to tell that story for you. Because that's one of the biggest complaints I hear is that, well, we're spending all this money a month and they're not bringing in qualified leads. And typically I ask them, well, how are you preparing them? And often I get sort of a guilty, like, well, yeah, we probably could have been preparing them better. And then this may not be as much of an issue for you, but then you have to be prepared to not only close the business, but you have to be prepared for managing the leads once they come in. Who are they talking to? Even simple things like, how easy is it to schedule? I've seen that before too. Leads start coming in and the agency hasn't thought about who's going to talk to those leads. And everyone says, well, I'm too busy. And this lead generator is like, I've got 30 people who want to talk to you, but I've no way of scheduling the appointment. So lots of things to think about. And yeah, it sounds like closing is a skill that you are already comfortable with, but if you're not comfortable with closing, then make sure that you address that. so that when
Okay.
leads come your way, it's actually there's a return on your investment.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you both so much. We're actually now out of time for questions. So if you would like to ask your question, you didn't have time, you can contact Jody via email, which is on the screen now. So that's jody@thesuttercompany.com. Or you could visit Jody's website, which is www.thesuttercompany.com. So I'm sure you'd all agree, we'd like to give a massive thank you to Jody Sutter for that wonderful webinar. And thank you all for coming. We really hope you enjoyed it. We will be holding webinars at the same time every Wednesday. So the next one will be held on the 25th of November, and that will be titled How to Make Your Agency Famous by the Man Who Did. Steve Sapka ran communications and media relations for Crispin Porter Bogutsky, probably the most famous independent agency in the world in the first decade of the 2000s. Now he runs his own firm, Sapka Communications, helping a new generation of independent agencies to become famous too. So this actually ties in quite well with what Jody was talking about. So in this intriguing webinar, Steve will share some of the insight he has learned that could help your agency to raise its profile in the world. So all future webinar Wednesdays can be found on our website under events. That is thenetwork1.com/webinars. They're all free and everyone is welcome, so please do sign up. Additionally, we are delighted to invite you to the Indie Awards presentation. So this will be held tomorrow, Thursday, the 19th of November from 4 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. London time. We're so excited about this and we really hope you can all join us. We're going to hear a 30-minute presentation from Jonathan Dominitz, who is the world's best creative coach, trainer, and mentor. Then, for an hour, we'll show the best creative work of 2020 from indie agencies all around the world. We'll present the 6 top prizes and hear the judges' view on why they chose the winners. You can register absolutely free, and again, everyone is welcome. And you can do this on our website, which is www.theindiaawards.global. So that's, sorry, I said the Indie Awards. It's www.indieawards.global. So we really hope that you'll join us tomorrow to celebrate, and we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye, everyone.